Alright guys, welcome to video 7. This is user authentication part 2. It's going to pick up right where video 6 left off. So when we left off, we were in our Drinker app and we had just set up this registration form here. So now we have to deal with this post. If somebody submits the form in our view, we have to figure out what to do with it now. So this else statement from here down is responsible for showing the form. This line is going to be responsible for dealing with someone submitting the form back. So here, first thing we're going to do is say form equals registration form, and we're going to pass it request.post. So it'll take the registration form and fill it out with whatever's been posted. And the first thing you're going to do whenever you're dealing with a form, say if form.isValid. So that's going to run through our custom validation that we set in there, all those clean methods. It's going to validate all the different fields, make sure everybody filled out what was required, make sure the email address is a real email, all that good stuff. The username's not taken, the passwords match. So if we go past this line, we know everything in the form is good. So the first thing that we're going to do from here is say user equals user.objects.create user, and we're going to say username equals form.cleaned data, and we're going to pass it what was in the username field. We're also going to say email equals form.cleaned data in the email field. And the last thing we're going to pass it is the password equals form.cleaned data password. So when it actually calls this form.cleaned data of password, the clean method, clean underscore password from our form, will actually verify that the two passwords match. So if you get to here, you already know that the passwords match, the email is a valid email address, the username is not already taken, so you're good to just go ahead and create this user object. Then we're going to say user.save to actually save the user object, which will provide the ability to log in. Then what we're going to do is say drinker equals user.get profile, and this is provided by auth profile module from the settings. So it will give you this get profile method that you can call against a user to get their drinker object that's attached to that user, and that'll come in handy a lot later on when we say request. So here we check to see if the request method is post. Later on we'll do something where we say user equals request.user.get profile, and that will set user equal to the drinker attached to whatever user is logged in according to the request. But we won't get into that just yet. That's just a little sneak peek for later. So now we have to set up some of the stuff with the drinker. So we're going to say drinker.name equals form.cleaned data name, and we're going to say drinker.birthday equals form.cleaned data of birthday, and then we're going to say drinker.save. So that's going to save our whole drinker and user object, give somebody the ability to log in using the username and the password. The account will be tied to that email address, and we're going to save their name and birthday out of the form they submitted, all in one big swoop. So after this is all done, we're going to return an HTTP response redirect to /profile. And then down here we need an else clause for this if form is valid. In case the form doesn't validate, the username is taken, the passwords don't match, anything goes wrong, the email isn't valid, we're going to return a render to response, and we're going to pass it back to register.html, And instead of actually giving it a context variable, we're actually just going to put the context right into here. We're going to say the form is the form that was passed in and give it a context instance. Request request context request. So this will send the form that's been submitted that's not valid as the context back to register.html, which will display the errors so that the person submitting the form can fix them. So now we've got a pretty fully functioning registration method, except for we're using the user class here, so we need to import that. So we're going to do that up here. The user object is provided from Django.contrib.auth.models import user. So that'll provide this here. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is go into our template and kind of set up this register.html to actually be a form that submits. So back in our templates directory, we're going to go into register. So you can see right now we're just kind of spitting out a form. It's very, very basic. So here we're going to say, we're going to actually make it an HTML form, and we're going to say form action is going to submit to itself, and the method is going to be post. Down here we're going to end the form. So one of the things you have to do when you're manually building a form is you have to put in a CSRF token. So CSRF is cross-site request forgery token. So what that does is it limits the posts from this form to the domain that the form is on. So you can't actually submit to this form from an external domain. So this will stop cross-site scripting attacks. And you'll have to be careful with that, because if you're going to embed any of this on an iframe on a different domain, you need to use the CSRF exempt decorator so that Django doesn't freak out and say, hey, you're being attacked from somewhere else. So the first thing we're going to do here, and this CSRF token actually gets hidden. We'll look at it when the form actually generates in a minute. And you'll see that it actually hides all the information in there and actually fills it in with the token. So here we're going to say if form.errors, and that's just a straight boolean. If there is actually form.errors, we're gonna do a P here. We're gonna say please correct the following fields. And then we have to end that if. And this will be, you can add a class to this P, call it like class equals error, and add some styles to it, you know, turn the font red, make it big, whatever, just so that people see, hey, this form errored. We're showing you where the errors are. So let's stop right here for a minute and take a look at what this is going to generate now. So if we refresh our form here, okay, so I'm authenticated, I need to log out. Let's go back to /register. Let's refresh that a couple times. So you can see the form looks exactly the same, but if we actually go into it and look, now we have this div that's display none, and you can see this input hidden, and here's our value, and the name is the CSRF middleware token. And so this actually provides a token that when you submit, we'll check against to see if this token is valid, and that's how we prevent cross-site scripting. So the next thing we need to do is manually flesh out this form. So instead of doing this form variable, we're just going to get rid of that, and we're going to put our form fields into divs. So we'll just do a div here. We'll say, give it a class equals register div, so we can CSS out all these divs. Close the div, and then inside this div we're going to say p. We're going to do a label for equals username, and then we're going to say if form.username.errors. So if the error actually exists on the username field, let's give it a class equals error, so you can CSS out this class. And we need to do an end if here. We're going to close our label tag, and we're going to say username colon, and we're going to say slash label and slash p. So now down here we have to actually give the username field, so we're going to say form.username, and that's going to actually fill in this p element with the field for people to fill in the username. So we'll put the errors underneath of the field for now. Actually, let's just go ahead and put them above. So we'll put it up here. Say if form.username.errors. Okay, so actually I need to put the p inside of there so that the p doesn't show up if there's no errors. So we'll put the p here, and we'll say let's do a p class equals error, so this will get formatted the same. And we'll say form.username.errors, and then we'll close our p and we'll end if. So this whole line here only shows up if there's actually an error on the username field. It'll show the error and say, hey, this username isn't valid, or it's already taken, or you can't have spaces or whatever. Then we have a label, so it'll say username colon, and then it'll give a username field. So that'll take care of our username. Now we have to do register div, close the div. So in here we're going to say if form.email. Okay, actually let's pull up the form and see what we called that. So back in our drinker, in the forms, let's see, we have email, password, password1. So let's start with those four. So back in our template, in register, we're going to say form.email.errors. We're going to say p class equals error, and we're going to do form.email.errors. Close our p, do an end if. And this gets really cumbersome, so a quicker way to do this is just to delete it and paste it. Then we'll go paste it again down here. So this is going to be the label for email, if form.email.errors, and our label is actually going to say email, and this is going to be form.email. So I'm going to skip ahead here, just build all this out. You don't need to watch me do this over and over. You get the idea. Alright, so now let's take a look at what this form looks like. So if we refresh over here, see we've got username, email, password, verify password, and you can see these are still the widget that hides everything, birthday and name. So now we've got a little form that we can deal with. So now we need to do a submit button at the end of this form, so we'll wrap that inside of a P, and we're going to say input type equals, we'll do image, so I can put an image in there later. Source is going to be /media images register.png, and alt is going to be register. So for now it'll use the alt tag because we don't actually have a register.png image in there. Okay, I don't have an image yet, so we'll just do for now we'll just change this to input type equals submit, and I'll get an image put in there later. Normally you can see how you do it with an image. So let's refresh, and there you go, submit query.
You've got freaking mail.
Yeah, so now we've got a fully functioning form. So let's click submit and see what happens. So you can see, please correct the following fields. This field is required username, enter a valid email address. These fields are required. So you can see, if we go into our CSS, these are actually all classed out. In the error class, so we could add an error class to our CSS and turn all this text red, you know, something like that that would make it obvious. And then these labels would also turn red because they also have the error class. So yeah, now we have a fully functioning form. So let me so here's what happens if I try to use a username that's already in there. And I'll give it an email address. It looks like an email address, some passwords, birthday, and my name is going to be ASDF. So let's submit. Alright, key error, password 1 and clean password. Alright, so we were having a little bit of a validation error with the forms, and I kind of reworked it a little bit. So let me show you guys what we did here. The problem with clean and then one of the variable names is that the only thing that gets passed into this function is the actual variable. So when we had it set up with clean underscore password and we were trying to compare it to password 1, it couldn't get to password 1 because password is the only thing that gets passed in. So what we did to solve it is we just made a whole clean method. So this will still validate the username, but this clean method will have access to all the variables that get submitted in the form. So inside of our clean method, we can pull the password and the password 1 and check if they match. And if they don't, we throw the validation error. Otherwise, we just return the clean data because they match and everything's good. So now we'll take a look at what happens when we put an email address that's already, or sorry, a username that's already in there. We'll put the same password in and submit the form. So it says this username's already taken, but the password's validated. There's no error on them. And so you can see here, this username is already taken. Please select another. Matches this error here. So it's actually failing this validation, saying that the user does exist. So our form validates now. And everything works. The next thing we're going to do is use the little jQuery UI to plug in a date selector here. Okay, so now we've got our form validation all worked out. We want to add a date picker to this birthday field. So we're going to use jQuery UI for that. You can just go to jQueryui.com. In their demos section, click on date picker. You can see in here, when you click in the date field, it pops up this thing that'll let you pick days. You can customize it all out, make it the dark theme. You know, they've got all this different stuff built in. And the way we use it is really simple. They give you the little script right here. That'll pretty much do it. And then there's all kinds of other options down here that you can add to customize it out. I'll let you guys play around with that. That's all just jQuery stuff. So you can download it from their download page right here, and you can customize it all out, minify it, get rid of all the stuff you don't need. And they tell you they also host jQuery UI on Google's CDN now. Since we're using jQuery UI, we also have to load jQuery, so we're going to load both of these in our template for the registration page. So let's take a look at that now. So in our templates folder, we have the register.html template, so we're going to go into there. Actually, first let's look at our base.html. So mostly what we've been playing with is this block content here. Now we're going to get into adding extra things into the head with this block extra head. So in our register template, above our block content, we're going to make a new block called extra head. So this is going to be block extra head. And then we're going to have to end that block before the block content starts. So now in here we want to load jQuery from Google. So we're going to copy that. We can go over here and it's going to be, okay, so we're going to load the scripts right here in this block extra head. So it's going to be script src equals, and we're going to paste that, so that'll load jQuery from Google CDN for us. Uses HTTPS, which is nice. And type is going to be text JavaScript. And then we're going to do the same thing down here. We're going to do script src equals, and we're going to copy the jQuery UI link from the Google CDN, paste that, and it's going to be type equals text JavaScript. Okay, and then now we need to actually paste this little script that they give us to actually initiate the date picker. So we're just going to copy that. I'm going to paste it right here. And you can see it asks for an ID of the field. So Django already gives the field an ID, which is pretty neat. We just have to figure out what it is. So if we look at the actual birthday field, you can see it's got the ID underscore birthday. So over here we're just going to change this to ID birthday. We're going to write that, restart the server, and now if we refresh this page a couple times, when we click birthday, nothing happens. So let's check out our console. Alright, so we've got our script loading here. Oh, yeah. Make much more sense if I actually loaded the script properly. So back in register, this actually is not a self-contained tag. These need to say /script. Alright, so let's refresh our page here. Alright, so now when we click birthday, you see this all shows up. We're missing the CSS, which is kind of annoying. I don't know if the Google CDN actually hosts the CSS, which doesn't look too. Okay, so we can actually download this. If you download it, you can actually grab the CSS file out of it, upload it, and then in your head here you would just load, with your extra head, you would load the jQuery UI CSS file that comes with it, and that'll CSS out your date picker. I'm just going to skip that for now because we can still click on it, fills in the date. So let's go ahead and register a new user. We'll call him ASDF, and we'll give him a password and name. So submit. So the next problem that we're running into now is when we try and register a user, we're getting this error that says birthday cannot be null, and it's coming from this function here, where we're actually doing the callback, where we've, here, let's pull it up here. So inside of our drinker, in our models, so it's this, when we hook into the post save on the user object and we're calling this back, what's happening is in our view we're creating the user object and it's trying to create the drinker object immediately, but the birthday field is coming up null, so it's having an error creating that, and that's kind of my fault. I jumped a little bit ahead. This automatically creates your drinker object when you create a user. So for now what we're going to do is just go ahead and comment all this out. We don't actually need any of this post save stuff. That's kind of to automate doing it, but we can do it manually, and that'll fix our problem here. So if we go back into our view, instead of doing it this way, the first thing that we need to do is from drinker.models, we need to import the drinker, and then down here we're going to get rid of all of these things here, and we're going to say drinker. Okay, we need to do that with the lowercase d. Drinker, because it's a variable name, equals drinker, and we're going to say user equals user that we just created up here, and we're going to say name equals form.cleaned data of name. We're going to say birthday equals form.cleaned data of birthday, and we're going to say, let's see, those are the only two things that we need to save. So this is going to create the drinker object manually, and then we're just going to do drinker.save instead of doing the automatic creation, getting the profile, and then setting all those things, because we have to set birthday when we create the object, because we have it set as not null. The other option is we could set all those fields in a drinker to be able to be null and then set them after, but it's a little bit dirtier, so we'll just do it this way where it's manual. So now if we restart, we'll go back over here, back to our register method, and we'll say ASDF2 now, and we'll create this. So you can see it takes me to profile now, which is what happens. That's the HTTP response redirect. So now if we actually log in here, so if we go into users, you can see there's this ASDF2 that got created, and the email address came over. And then if we go into our drinkers, you can see ASDF2 was now created, and it's attached to the ASDF2 user, takes the birthday and the name. So now our registration is all working. People are able to register for the website. So the next thing we're going to have to do now is give them the ability to log in. So there's a few different ways that we can approach how to log a user in. Django provides a whole bunch of different ways. You can simply subclass the login.html form. You can create a whole form from scratch and make it do all kinds of different stuff. We're just going to create one, a very basic one from scratch, so you can see the entire process. Later on we'll come back when we look at the login required decorator and add some more functionality to it, but for now we're just going to do a pretty basic one. So the first thing we need to do is inside of our drinker app we're going to make another form for the login itself. So down here we're going to say class login form, and that's we're we're not going to extend anything. Actually, I think we have to extend forms.form. So it's just a basic form. It doesn't extend any models or anything like that. It's only going to have two fields. We're going to have the username. It's going to be forms.char field, and the label, we'll call it username, and then we're going to have the password. It's going to be forms.char field, and we'll give it a label equals password. And we'll use the same widget again for this one so that the password comes in all blocked out. So this is just going to be password input render value equals false. So now we have a whole form. That's pretty much about all we need to do. So now in our views, we're going to import the form first. So we got to put login form so we can get access to it. And now down here, we're going to define a new view called login request. That's going to take a request. So we're going to start by checking if they're already logged in. If request.user.is authenticated, we're going to return the HTTP response redirect to /profile. That way you can't log in twice. And then we're going to say if request.method equals post. So if they're posting the form, for now we're just going to pass on that, and we'll come back and fill that in a minute. Else they're not posting the form. So user's not submitting the form. Show the login form. So here we're going to say form equals login form, and we're going to add it to the context, and we're going to return a render to response, and we're going to call this login.html, pass it the context and the context instance. Okay, so now we have to go make this login.html template. So back in our templates folder, we're going to vim login.html. Actually, okay, so for this, it's going to be easier if we just copy register.html to login.html. So now we'll go into this and we'll just we can get rid of all this extra head block. We don't need to load any scripts. So we've got a form, our CSRF token. If there's form.errors, we'll leave that. We'll leave form.username, and we can get rid of this whole div with the email. We can leave the password, and then we'll just get rid of all these other divs down here. Alright, so that's more or less going to give us the whole login form. So now in our URLs, we need to make a view that hooks up to that. So we're going to say if we're going to login, it's going to be drinker.views.login request. So we'll restart the web server. And now let's take a look and see if we go to /login. So now we've got a username and a password field on a login page. So now we have to deal with what happens when this gets submitted. So we'll go back into our Drinker app in our views, and now we're going to fill in this request.method is post. So let's see. First thing we're going to do is say form equals login form, and we're going to send it request.post to fill itself out. I say if form.is valid. So we're going to say username equals request dot, this would actually be form.cleaned data of username, so we'll pull that out of the form, and we'll say password equals form.cleaned data of password. So now we have the two variables locally that we can mess with. So when you log someone in, you can read about this on the Django docs. There's two methods you have to call. First, you have to call authenticate, which will check to make sure that the user account's valid and that they have the ability to log in. And then you have to call login. So the first thing we'll do is import these two functions that we need. So we're going to say from django.contrib.auth import authenticate and login. And it's not a good idea to call this function login because django.contrib.auth already provides a function called login. So if you try and name it just login, it's going to freak out. That's why I name it login request. So the first thing we need to do is say drinker equals authenticate, username equals username, password equals password. So that's going to return a drinker object if the username and the password are valid. Otherwise, it's going to return null. So now we just test it and we say if drinker is not. So in Python, the null variable is called none. So if it's not none, we're going to log in the request as the attached drinker. And then once that's done, we're going to return HTTP response redirect to /profile because it'll already be logged in. Else, this is if authentication failed, we're going to return an HTTP response redirect to /login because their credentials failed. And if the form isn't valid, we're going to return a render to response. It's going to be login.html, and our context is going to be the form, and we're going to have the context instance request context requests. So I'm actually going to copy and paste this line up to here. We're going to get rid of the response redirect. So this way, if it errors, we'll actually send them back and show them the error rather than just redirecting them to login. That'll make it a little more easier for people to understand what's going on. Alright, so now let's see if we restart. So if my username and my password, let's hit submit. So you can see it took me to profile, so we logged in and we're good to go. Alright, so now we have to do a log out function. So in our views, first thing we have to do is import logout, which is also provided by Django contrib auth. It's just called logout. So here we're going to def logout request, and all we're going to say is log out the request, and we're just going to return an HTTP response redirect, and we'll just send them back to the home page for now. So logging people out is actually really simple to do. Just log out the incoming request. So back in our URLs now we have to hook that up. So we're going to say regular expression log out. It's going to be drinker.views.logout request. Okay, so you can see here, if I try to go to /login, because I'm already authenticated, it automatically redirects me to /profile. So if I go to /logout, you see it takes me back to the slash. And if I try to go to login again, you can see it shows the form now because I'm no longer authenticated. So now we have logging in and logging out completely working. Now we're going to add buttons for login and log out to the template, and we'll add them over here. So when you're logged out, you'll have a login button. When you're logged in, you'll have a log out button. Okay, so now we're going to add a login and log out button up here in the corner. This is going to be something that's all done at the template level. So the first thing we're going to do is go into our templates, and we're going to do this to the base template so that it shows up in all of our templates from here on out. So inside of our page container, you can see where our block content goes, and that's where all of our templates end up filling in their content. So up here we're going to do a div id equals, we'll just call this nav top right for now. Usually I name it something like secondary nav or something like that. You can really name it anything you want. So here we're going to use a template level if statement. So we're going to say if user.is authenticated, and user is an object that all of your templates will have access to. So if it is, we're going to say we'll wrap it inside of a P, and we'll give it an href to /logout, and this is just going to say logout. And then we're going to say else, so this is if they're not authenticated now. We're going to do P with an A, and the href is going to be /login, and the word is going to be login. And then we have to, of course, end our if statement. Alright, so now let's take a look. Let me just restart this real quick. So now let's take a look at what that does. So you can see right now we're logged out. So if we click on login, username and a password. So profile is not found, but if we go to /, you see now it says log out. I'll refresh a bunch of times, it'll still say log out. When we click it, it's going to log us out, take us back to login again. So that's how simple it is to deal with logging users in and out. You can just test if user.is authenticated in your template, show things for authenticated users. You can use an else to show things for unauthenticated users. So it becomes really easy to reuse same templates over and over and hide things from those people who aren't logged in and show them to the people who are. So this pretty much wraps up user authentication. I'll get a little more into some of the other stuff a little down the road, some of the stuff like the login required decorator, resetting passwords, things like that. But stay tuned.